This podcast is brought to you by PodSpot Events.
Hello and welcome to the Bondi Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Beattie. The guest on this episode is Renee Kirkman. Now, Renee wears a lot of hats, but I know her best as a breathwork facilitator. However, some of you may actually recognise her from the drum circle that takes place in North Bondi every Sunday afternoon. Now, I first met Renee at one of her group breathwork events earlier this year when I was going through a bit of a tough time. I remember turning up to the event and I was actually greeted by Renee at the door with a massive hug and it really helped, and our friendship really just went from there. Now, the conversation with Renee starts off quite lighthearted. Renee's good fun, she's a good vibe, but as the conversation goes on, it does get quite intense and Renee talks through some of her own experience of abusive past relationships and how she was actually eventually able to break the cycle of those previous toxic relationships. If you like what you hear about Renee's events or her offering or her breath work, I would really encourage you to give her a follow on Instagram, drop into her DMs if you have any questions, or maybe even go along to one of her breathwork events. That's something I really found helped me earlier this year. And as always, guys, remember to give us a follow on Instagram at the Bondi Podcast, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll find all our episodes on Spotify. Cheers. Renee, welcome to the podcast.
I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in. I really, really, really appreciate it. I know it was a bit of a last minute call today. But
it was the best.
Really appreciate it.
If it was a last minute phone call, if I can think of all the things you could get a last minute phone call for, to come and hang out with you and do a podcast, I would hands down say yes every day.
That was the universe it was meant to be. Yeah. I honestly have no idea where this conversation's going to go.
I'm excited for that.
And I'm kind of okay with it. I'm usually a bit of a control freak, but I think with you, I kind of loosen up a little bit, and I'm just going to roll with it. That's kind of what Renee does. That's the energy she gives off. So I'm just going to roll with it.
This is good. This is the energy.
Yeah, perfect. But we are going to ask the first question that we ask every single guest. Renee, what is your favourite thing about Bondi?
I was trying to think about how holistic I could get with this answer, because it could be so many facets. And what I'm rolling it up to is lifestyle, because, and to me it has a potential to sound a bit wanky, but when I drill down into that, that's because for me, I get in the ocean every day.
I know.
I know. I see you and I'm
in the ocean every day.
Freezing. But that's lifestyle for me. That's the lifestyle of me doing the things that really are important for my mindset and for my body. Getting in the ocean every day, being in nature every day, seeing the sunrise and the sunset every day. So lifestyle, and that's the first component of lifestyle. And the second is the human component. Because for me, Bondi is about the community. I walk down the road and I chat to every single person. Well, maybe not everyone, because a few people look at me like I'm a bit weird. But everyone out, everyone I smile at, I chat to. There's this beautiful old guy who I see doing exercise every morning, and he just gives me the hugest smile, and I know all the dogs, and it's about community. That's part of lifestyle for me, because the human element and community makes such a big difference to what your life is like and your experience of life every day. So yeah, that's probably it. And then, in addition to that, obviously there's sun and beach and all of those things that other people go to Bondi for, and they're also amazing. But to me, lifestyle in terms of nature, in terms of the community, they're probably the things that really I love. Yeah. And I think I was just mentioning earlier, I have to move at the moment. Maybe quite a few people in Bondi, my rent is going up, and so I've
been hit with it as well,
don't
worry. Yeah.
I feel like it's a thing. Almost everyone I'm speaking to at the moment is in this process or anticipating it or dreading it, or it's a really big topic. But
I think you might have just answered this question, but the follow-up question to the initial one is, what's your least favourite thing about Bondi? But I think you're going to say the rent.
That would probably be it. Because still, when I talk to my family, or my family is still in Brisbane, and when I told them about my rent increase and how much it would be overall, they were like, you're what?
Yeah.
Like, what do they want you to pay a week? What? Yeah. Anyway.
Well, let's talk about that move to Bondi then.
Yeah.
So what was pulling you in?
To Bondi.
Yeah.
Well, there was a couple of things. One, probably the drums and that community. Like, that's part of kind of fundamentally what drew me here, because that is part of my family.
Yeah.
And my partner, Renato, lived here. I want to be here. This is where I want to be.
Yeah.
This is where I wanted to do life.
Yeah, for all those good things you mentioned at the start.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the drum circle. So I don't know. This is maybe what you're most well known for in and around Bondi. So I don't know, for those people listening who maybe don't know what goes on a Sunday in North Bondi, I don't know. Renee, talk us through it. How did you get involved?
Yeah.
So what is it? What goes on?
It's such a, I don't know, not, as you said, not everybody knows about it, but like genuinely there are people who travel from other states to come, travel from other parts of Sydney to come. But every Sunday, it depends. In winter, it's usually about 3:30. In summer, it's usually about 4:30 because it's so hot. Yeah. We gather as many people as bring drums and other instruments, and we basically just create a vibe for the community. It's not about, I think sometimes people don't always necessarily understand the why of it. It's not just to make noise. It's basically about community coming together and energy. And
how did you get involved?
Yeah, it was, I happened to be at an event that Charles Missy, who is one of the founding members of the drumming circle, I was at one of his events, and he said, we were talking at the end, and he said, what are you doing on Sunday? And I was like, I don't know, why? He's like, you should come. There's this thing we do. We just, circle drums. I think you'd really like it. And, I didn't know heaps of people in Sydney, and definitely not in that kind of way. Yeah. So I was a little nervous, and I almost didn't come over that Sunday. But I'm so glad I did. Because I had that whole, if you go and you don't like it, you can just get in the car and drive home, and, all of those things. But I turned up, within 15 minutes, I had an instrument in my hand.
So you were just invited to come along, just to sort of be in and around it, maybe have a bit of a dance just to check the vibe out. But literally you were handed a tambourine. What were you handed? A tambourine?
It was a tambourine, yeah.
You were handed a tambourine, and then what?
And then I just was like, all right, yeah. And then I literally, every Sunday since then, generally in the last 3 years, it's almost been 3 years. In November it will be 3 years. Wow. 3 years ago that was. And it's a thing, because we get, at the end of the drumming circle, so we come together, we play instruments, people come and they dance, and even if they don't dance, they just sit and clap and enjoy the vibes of it all. And at the end, people come up to us, and we've never met them before, don't know who these people are. They hug us or they shake our hands and they say, thank you. I can't tell you how much I needed that. Or thank you, that made my week. Thank you, that vibe is so great. I just feel so good now. I can go to work tomorrow. It's actually fascinating how bringing people together and lifting the vibe and the energy just makes such a big difference for people. It's amazing. And for me, people often sometimes say to me, how do you do it every Sunday? Because sometimes I've got so much else going on. I've got so many facets of life, and people are like, why don't you just not go? And I'm like, I don't know if I could. I don't know. I mean, I have made some of those decisions where I have not been able to fit it in. But those weeks feel weird for me.
But
to not be there.
The way I see it, so I go up quite a lot just to check it out. The way I see it when I walk past is if the drum circle's the orchestra, you're the conductor with your tambourine in the middle. So I can't actually picture the drum circle going on without you sort of conducting things.
I call myself the CEO of the drums,
right.
But that is the Chief Excitement Officer.
Okay.
That's my role.
And that's the official title?
I mean, I made that up. But I think it's generally, there's a couple of things. I think there's lots of, I tend to bring and connect the team together because, there's lots of blokes in the drumming circle, and so it's good to sometimes bring that feminine energy
Absolutely.
that pulls it together. You've got to have both. You've got to have some balance.
Correct.
So I think that's part of it. And I don't know. I just naturally feel like I'm a connector as well, and so I just love being that energy. One of my values, like when I work, with clients or in events or in any facet of my life, I always tap into my values. And one of those is, well, two of them kind of link together. One is about authenticity, and the other is like, be the energy, bring the energy that you want to experience. And I feel like the drum circle is a perfect opportunity for me to do that.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
So I know that you missed a couple of Sundays recently. You're in Bali.
I was.
What was going on?
Oh my gosh. It's been a massive last. I genuinely still think I'm integrating, but I spent a week in Bali just doing some extra breathwork training. So I have done my breathwork certification previously, but this was just another level and focused a little bit more on some very hands-on somatic work while breathwork.
Okay, and for those of us that don't know what somatic is.
What is that word?
Yeah.
That fancy word. It's about the body, basically. Okay. So the thing that I love about breath work is it is an experience where you get to release stuff through the body. And also, happy to chat about the fact that breath work is one of those things. It's kind of like the new yoga.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a thing. It's a word, and lots of people use it, and lots of people now incorporate it into a thing. It's like, oh, we're doing an event, and there's this, and there's this, and there's breath work, and there's this, and there's this.
Ice baths.
Ice baths and breath. Ice bath and breath. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
But like lots of things, not all breath is created equal. Not even that. Like, there are so many different types of breath work.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about those events. I've been to a few of them. Like,
they came about.
Yeah. How did they come about? And if you've not been before, like, what can you expect?
So fundamentally, the crux of it is that when people arrive, I greet everybody because it's, for me, I want to look people in the eye. I want to give them a hug. I want to feel their energy. But more importantly, I want them to feel my energy because I want them to feel safe in what we do. And so I get a hug, they get a hug, we do a nice cleansing. I use a beautiful Love Alchemy. She's also a Bondi local who's an absolute legend. Use her beautiful incense to cleanse, and then usually people come in, they get a beautiful oil to help. There's always these layers because every single part of this is actually part of the experience. It helps you to go deeper. And then people either get tea or cacao, and then they come and we do a really intention journey in the sense that, like, we set intentions first and we craft it in a way that people feel comfortable. And that's really important. Because
so when you say set intentions, give an example there.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Breathwork is such that you can set an intention, but you also have to let it go, because while you're in the journey, the thing that you thought you wanted to work on actually turns into something else. And so it's about setting a really clear intention about what is it that I would like to work on? What would I like to let go? Or what would I like to bring in? And I always typically start with what's going on often in the world at the time, like in people's lives, like what's the energy maybe astrologically that's going on at the time, what's the vibe that I feel when I've been talking to clients or like out in the community, what's going on in general. And we kind of go, so here's a focus, we're going to focus on this. And maybe that, for example, could be what do we need to let go of to truly love and accept ourselves as we are in this moment. And so people will write down, like for me, I need to let go of like my anger at my mother, or that's not me personally, I love you, Mum, but that's an example. They might need to let that go, or they might want to look at that in the journey.
So is it all about love and acceptance?
No, sometimes it's about like, what do I actually fully need to feel the anger for? Because that's one of the things that people don't often these days experience is emotions. So emotions need to be felt so they can shift and move through you. So, in when we get into the breath journey, I always encourage people to feel whatever emotion they feel. So love is beautiful, but also anger can also be incredibly powerful to move people forward in new and different ways. So we set intentions. And we do a really nice sharing component as well, so that people feel really close to the people that are in the room with them. And
what's the importance of that?
Yeah, it's because, well, Renato and I are there to help hold space. Obviously, that's our job as space holders in inverted commas. It sounds so wanky, doesn't it?
Yeah, let's
Far
maybe
out.
delve into that.
Space holders.
So you and Renato are obviously there in the room with everyone.
Yeah.
And when you say holding space, what does that mean?
Well, a couple of things. This is the way I see it, and there's some scientific elements to it, and there's some woo-woo elements to it.
Beautiful. Hit me.
The scientific elements is the idea of co-regulation. So fundamentally, it's proven that people co-regulate nervous systems. They co-regulate up in terms of intensity of their nervous system and how stressed out they might be, and they can also co-regulate down. So what it means is, have you ever been hanging out with a friend who seems to be always stressed, and then that kind of makes you feel a bit stressed? You co-regulate. You regulate in a coexisting way with their nervous system. It's the same for down-regulation in terms of calmness. And so from a scientific point of view, holding space is actually about being the calm, centered energy so that people feel that and can regulate to that and can match that, if that makes sense. So that's the scientific. The woo-woo kind of side, I guess, is it's a big responsibility to hold a room of people when they release old stories, trauma. Sometimes they cry. Generally, we always scream. There's a lot that goes on. So it's a big responsibility to be the person that makes sure everyone is feeling safe. So to me, that's a core part of Space Holder is to be that energy for people to feel calm around so that they can release, and to just hold them and to know what to do in that time. Because some people, they're out there at the moment, like someone was telling me the other day, they were like, oh yeah, my friend, she literally looked at me and she said, I'm so glad I found you when we found breathwork. And I was like, oh, that's a big statement. What are you, let's unpack that. She said, oh, actually, because a friend of mine, I was talking the other day, and, I talked about the fact that we'd just been to your event, and and a friend of mine had said, oh, yeah, I did breathwork too. And, her recounting of the experience was that this person wasn't necessarily a, in inverted commas, space holder, in the sense that, they'd trained in the, I don't know what the word would even be, the modality of breath work, and they'd trained in the science of it. But actually, when you hold people in trauma, that's another level. Because sometimes people think you need to jump in and do something. But actually, some of the most powerful thing to do is just be. Yeah. The co-regulation and being. And sometimes you can just say the right one word. But it's actually knowing what is right to do when, and what is right to, when it's right to not actually say or do anything, but just be the person that lets that crying happen. I don't know if I answered that question. That's a little bit woo-woo.
That's okay. That's allowed. I was kind of expecting that. Let's talk a little bit about the actual breath technique at these events. Can you tell us a little bit about
Conscious Connected? Yeah. So it's a there's two different types of events that we do, or two different types of breaths that I love working with. So one is parasympathetic breath work. And
super chill.
That's the super chill. Yeah. That's where fundamentally you are turning on your parasympathetic nervous system, and so your body goes, I can rest. And rest is then when all of the actual organs of your body can start doing their functioning. So that's why they call it rest and digest mode, because it's when your body digests food and it does all of those things. So often that's so important, because often, and more in this day and age, and definitely in the last couple of years, people live more in fight or flight. They live more where their nervous system is sympathetically turned on. They're living in a stage where they're more stressed, they're anxious, and their cortisol levels are high in their body. And I've been that person before. I know this because I've been that. I lived that for a long time. And it was that's part of how breath work came to me to be part of my toolkit to help support myself. But you can't live in that way. So parasympathetic breath is actually really important to help calm and literally allow your body to reset and rejuvenate. And so I love doing that. And the other extreme, because there's a lot in between as well of different types of breath. The other extreme is conscious connected breathing, or transformational breathwork journeys is fundamentally what we typically call them. And so it's a 3-part breath. And so it's 2 really big deep breaths in one into the belly and then into the chest. And the exhale is just kind of letting the breath go. And what's important about this is that your ratio of inhale is longer than your exhale ratio. And that is what activates. Now, interestingly, what it does is it activates your sympathetic nervous system, but it's to tip you back over into parasympathetic mode. So what it does is you're taking in more oxygen than you are, and in terms of your CO2 to oxygen ratio.
Yeah. So you're oxygenating the body?
Yeah.
Big time.
And that's why...
And it's all through the mouth as well,
yes,
Renee?
through the mouth, which it's another one of those things which I love, can be a little controversial because, I completely understand. I am breath aware. I'm trained as a breath coach. I'm breath woke. In addition to facilitating experiences, I, as a breath coach, can also help support people be better aware in their breath journey. So breathing through your nose is obviously where you want to be living life from. And actually they've even done studies and proven that breathing through your nose, if you've been breathing through your mouth for a period of time, can actually even change the structure of your face. Like, it's fascinating. But obviously breathing through your nose is where you want to be living life from. That's because it helps to calm the system down more. But what we want to do is activate the system. We want to activate it because we want to get rid of shit, because we're hanging on to it. And yes, you can also release in the parasympathetic state. So I've had, interestingly, a few breathwork practitioners who work in more the parasympathetic mode, who have maybe made comments on how they don't agree with a very active breath, and that people with stress and anxiety should not do it. But actually, I disagree. And my experience of the people who come to our events and the people that I support one-on-one is that it can fundamentally shift and transform stress and anxiety. Yes, parasympathetic breathwork can do that as well. But sometimes the thing that we're hanging on to that makes us most anxious is something that the body needs to let go of in a more powerful way. And so when people breathe in this way, they'll often experience a few things. So physically, what people might experience is tetany, which can, for some people, be quite painful.
So describe it. What is it?
Well, imagine a T-Rex, basically. So basically, it's when your hands are cramping. It's because you're shifting and changing the oxygen and CO2 ratio. Your hands start to cramp, and they can cramp in front of your body. Sometimes I've seen people, like their literally hands end up going like above their heads, and they're cramped out here. They can't take clothes off, they can't open water bottles, they can't do all of those things. But it can be quite intense. But there are schools of thought in breathwork that say tetany and the intensity of it is an indicator of the stress and anxiety and the tension that you're holding on to. And so you breathe through it, and there is always magic on the other side. And I've never had any breathwork journey that I have facilitated where people don't come back to normal use of their hands afterwards.
So I can only speak to my experience, really, and my first experience in one of your classes.
What the fuck was that?
Yeah, exactly. Now, what happened to me was I was obviously lying on the floor, and I felt the tetany kick in, but I resisted the urge to sort of pull my hands up to be in front of my chest. Yeah. I was sort of pinned down to the floor. My forearms were like pinned down to the floor. I'm on my back, but it felt like every limb in my body was like stuck to the floor. The back of my calves, the back of my legs, like my lower back, like even like my hip flexors, like both my arms. I was like pinned to the floor. And I tell people, like, if someone had said, Chris, wiggle your big toe and I'll give you $1 million, I couldn't have done it. What the fuck was going on? Like, what is happening at that point in time? Because I can feel, I don't want to say pain, but I can feel like certain areas of the body that are just heavy and just stuck to the floor.
And that's like another thing, you know, when I talk about the physical experience that's possible in breath work that we talk about is pain in focus areas of the bodies or different levels of heaviness. Or it could even be lightness even. So it could be both. But your body holds on to the memory of everything that you've experienced in life, basically. It's kind of like an elephant.
Yep.
You know,
never forgets.
Never forgets. And so it stores it in your muscles, in your fascia, in your organs.
Mm-hmm.
And fundamentally, you know, there are theories about how the hanging on to that emotion in your body is what leads to illness. It leads to dis-ease because you're storing this stagnant energy in your body, in your fascia, in your organs.
So is it potentially trauma or...
Yeah. Trauma, old stories, and typically where you experience it in your body is also an indicator of the type of emotion or the type of memory that you might be storing. So
you mentioned your hips earlier.
Yeah.
So what...
Yeah.
So I hear, you know, it's one of these things that you hear, a lot of trauma gets stored in your hips. I don't really know what that means.
It does because, and particularly for women,
okay.
And that's for a number of reasons. You know, this is your creation center. And there's lots of things that the hips represent about moving forward as well. And so different body parts that's why I studied emotional anatomy, which is another one of my, you know, rabbit holes I could go down. But, you know, fundamentally our body speaks to us. But what happens is these days we just have stopped listening.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love breath work, because
it brings it out.
It brings it out for you to release it. It brings it out for awareness, which is why I always, you know, like say to people, oh, you know, was it at your left side or your right side that you felt it? Oh, your stomach. Oh, okay. Was there something about identity? And, you know, then people kind of have a moment where they go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So, you know, it's fundamentally your body talking to you in terms of the location. Could even be the type of pain that's experienced, because you know, when people come for even one-on-one sessions and we're talking about a symptom that they might be experiencing, the location of the symptom is important, but also the feeling that it gives is important. Mm-hmm. Take, for example, dermatitis or eczema, you know, on the body. That fundamentally, it's like, oh, cool. What's the experience? Like, what do you feel? Oh my gosh, it's like so agitated. I'm just like want to rip my skin off. And it's like, well, you go, oh, okay. Well, what's really frustrating you in life at the moment that you're not communicating? And they're like,
light bulb.
You know. So it's the location. But it's also the actual feeling that you experience. You know, is it the density of it? Is it something that's holding you back, or is it like a stabbing pain? Like, what's really annoying you, or you know, is it a deep sadness? Yeah. And that always also makes a massive difference as well. So, yeah, that's the thing I love about breath work. It's physically, it helps you let you go.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that stands out to me from that first session, and there was about 30 of us in the room, wasn't there?
The most we would ever have is 30.
Yeah.
So on average is about 20.
Yeah. Okay.
But 30 is like, to me, the max. I think in terms of people breathing and experiencing their trauma in a room together.
Yeah. So I wasn't sure what to expect. And then before we got into it, you were doing your sort of intro talk and you said, look, you know, you all might go on these different journeys. So I've had people at this end of the room laughing hysterically, and I've had people at the other side of the room in tears or screaming. And I had no idea that that's what I was in for.
You're like,
and
what
then,
the fuck did I say?
So I was in the middle of the room, and you're right, there was people on one end of the room just screaming, and there was someone at the other end of the room and crying, and I was actually in the middle of the room laughing. Like my initial response outside of just breathing, and I think it was the point where I realized that I was like pinned to the floor. I just started laughing hysterically, and I don't know why.
It's a release of emotion. So there are lots of different ways we release emotion.
Yeah.
So crying is one of them. Obviously, screaming is one of them.
Yeah.
And laughing is another.
Yeah.
So laughing is incredibly therapeutic in breathwork, but in general, because it's another emotional release avenue.
Yeah. And then you toward the end of it, you got us through the big collective group scream, which was fucking amazing. It felt so good. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, a couple of things. One, people don't, like, when do you ever just fucking go out in somewhere and scream and, like, actually release in that way? I would dare say people just generally don't do that. But we keep so much inside of us. Yeah. And so it's an ability, it's a capability of, like, literally holding space for people to go and just scream, like, let it out. And particularly when you're in those moments of the journey. So, you know, in some journeys I don't feel it, so I don't do it. Not generally in the group setting. I will always, in a one-on-one, you know, it's always really important to feel kind of where the person is at, as to whether a scream is helpful or necessary, maybe one, not two. But it's such an incredibly powerful release. And almost every single time we do an event, someone says, that was so powerful because I just didn't even think I could scream, but I did. And because you're in a room, you know, I've talked with a number of people who don't feel comfortable yet doing their healing work in a room with lots of other people. And so they come and have a one-on-one, and then they kind of transition to that. They're different. One-on-one and group is just a different experience. The breath is the same. In fact, in one-on-one, my support is even more because I am always with you for co-regulation, support, somatic work. But the experience of an event where you have other people who are having a shared experience with you, and it's almost like they give you permission. Someone else in the room is crying, and so they give you permission to cry. Yeah. And that's a beautiful experience. But not everybody is there, which is why I offer, you know, one-on-one or even small group. I've had people of up to a group of four friends, four people who wanted to come together as friends and do a journey, but not in a large group.
So let's talk about the smaller groups and the one-on-ones specifically. What sort of things do your clients come to you with, or what sort of things do you help them with?
Yeah, wow, it's pretty broad at the moment.
We'll keep in the breathwork lane, because I know that you wear a lot of hats, Renee. We'll keep in the breathwork lane, so like breathwork specifically.
Yeah, definitely. Look, in terms of the type of breathwork, I do both the parasympathetic breath and the transformational breathwork, so conscious connected breathing in sessions with people one-on-one and in groups. It can be anything. I've supported people one-on-one with, you know, going through and really delving deep into some very old sexual abuse and holding the space for that, and that's big in and of itself. Supporting people with abusive childhoods and, you know, processing memories and stories of that. The thing is that sometimes people think those big T's, they're really big. Big T is in big trauma. As in they're big things that people are hanging on to and working through and needing some support just to hold space as they do that. But often people don't realise it's the little T that gets us as well, and that's little trauma. That could be the one comment that someone said when they were a kid that didn't mean anything in particular, but they made it to mean something, because we're meaning-making machines, right? Yeah. So people say something and we make it to mean something because we transform it into what would that mean for us? But it didn't necessarily have that intention, and that can become something that shapes us as we get older. I can tell you an example from my own experience. I when I was a kid, my nickname was 4AY. For anyone who lives in Queensland, that is a radio station. And the tagline for the radio station is the voice of the North. It was because I was, I was loud and I was full.
You.
Yeah, what are you talking about? You? And interestingly, I'm that now. Like, and if
Yeah.
someone called me 4AY, I'd be like, yes, my mission is fulfilled.
You'd own it,
I
yeah.
would fully own it. But when I was a kid, that was very big for me to hear. And it was made in jest and it was a joke, but I made it to mean that I was too loud and I was too much. And so I made myself very small.
Wow.
So for a period of time, I was definitely not myself.
Wow.
And so that was part of my own healing journey, was to come back and, embrace 4AY and how, and the fullness, and be the person who laughs loudly in a room and doesn't give a fuck if no one else is laughing. I am that person because that's fundamentally who I am.
Yeah.
That's an example of what would be little t. It's like not really trauma. It was an experience of something that was said, but I made it to mean something. I made it to mean I was too big and too much.
Yeah.
And lots of people...
So how did you work through that? Sorry, how did you sort of uncover that,
Yeah.
Jem?
Look, through all of the things, like fundamentally the modalities that I trained in because I use them for myself first and foremost. So it was just part of a very big series of incredibly traumatic relationships. I had a number of abusive relationships. I had physically abusive relationships, emotionally and mentally abusive, sexually abusive relationships as an adult. And
Sorry, when did that... This sounds like a bit of a pattern emerging over when did that start?
I got married when I was 20 years old.
Shit.
It was probably not my smartest move ever, but really it was, because it kind of fundamentally contributed to who I am today. But I was young. Where did I meet him? Out at a club. I was 20.
In Brizzy?
In Brizzy. No, I was 18. I met him when I was 18 in Brizzy, out. And then got married at 20.
Wow.
And what I uncovered was that he was probably not necessarily the person that I thought he was. And it ended up being a very unhealthy relationship for me. And it was probably one of the most traumatic things I've ever had to do in my life, was to leave that relationship. And so at 22, when no one really knew what was going on, because I'd hidden it, yeah. I hid it all away. And
were you still sort of at that stage repelling 4AY?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I was like deep in the trying not to be big and trying to be small, and just rebelling in general, I think, because that was part of probably why I got married at that age, because everyone said, don't get married. And I was like, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I called my mum at the age of 22. I think it was mum. Yeah, it was mum. And I said, I'm just letting you know that I need you to come and pick me up tomorrow. I am going to pack a suitcase. I need you to bring Dad, and I need you to come and get me, and I need to leave. And
what was the tipping point that brought you to that decision?
Yeah, it was. I can't even remember now what the argument was about, but he pushed me quite considerably, and it was already
physically or
physically, yeah. And I had already been. It was already an incredibly traumatic experience of life. I was teaching at the time, actually. I was a high school teacher. And so I was earning good money, but I wasn't able to access my money. He would keep my key card, and I was only allowed to buy certain clothes and do certain things, see certain people.
And you thought this was normal?
Well, I hadn't really had an adult relationship before this. I was 18 when I met him, so I didn't think it was normal, but it happened so incrementally, and I feel like this is a story that often people don't realise. Because people see me now and they when they hear about it, they go like, how could you, who's such a full, independent, strong woman, ever let that happen? And I was like, because you don't know. It happens over time, so much so you wake up one day and go, where the fuck am I? How am I? And there was a point where I asked myself, can I do this for the rest of my life? And the answer was no. And so at that point in time, people have choice. People always have choice. And sometimes people say they don't have choice. And yes, some of those situations are incredibly hard to leave. I made the choice. That was hard. And I left. And the unraveling of that was still hard, I still remember he rang me one day and said, it's nothing without you. All I ever did it was for you, and literally threatened to kill himself if I didn't come back. And so that's a lot
How
of...
soon after you left?
I think that was within the first 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And, it was...
And guilt and
still,
shame and all that stuff, yeah.
Massive. Yeah, it was a lot to deal with as a 20.
What did you do after receiving that call?
Well, I felt all the guilt and feels, and I almost considered going back. And then I asked myself again, is this something you want for the rest of your life? And I said no. And so I went, okay, then I have to do the hard thing. And no matter what. And this is like probably why I'm so incredibly grateful for my upbringing, my mum's influence in life around, you've got to be responsible for yourself. You can't make anyone feel anything. You can't make anyone do anything. They make that choice. You choose for yourself. And so I chose for myself. Yeah, and I've had to do that since in a number of times as well. So
did you repeat that pattern? Did you end up in...
Yeah, fucking didn't learn my lesson.
Wow.
You'd think I would.
How many times are you talking?
I got married the second time when I was 30.
Okay.
So exactly 10 years later.
Yeah.
It wasn't an abusive relationship, but it was very non-serving. We were very just not good for each other. In
what way?
We would bring out the worst in each other, not the best in each other. And
toxic.
Yeah, very. And for me, I was like, oh wow, I'm not a person who's angry, and I feel angry, and anger's good. Like if you feel anger, it's an opportunity to feel it and let it go, like do something different. So it's not a bad emotion. People think it's bad, it's not. But if you live in that state, that's not healthy. Mm-hmm. And a relationship where you feel like you have to just push all the time is not healthy. So yeah, I kind of had to extract myself from that, and then I had another 2 relationships that were
after the second marriage.
After the second marriage, that were very not serving me, and the last one was kind of
both abusive.
In different ways, yeah. Probably the one of them was more like mentally, emotionally abusive.
So what sort of things?
Like, how do I explain it? It was kind of like he didn't want to. We didn't tell anyone that we were together for a period of time.
Why not?
There was a mixture of even though I had been separated for a while, I was still finishing the actual divorce paperwork and separation paperwork. So it was like, actually, it's going to be easier if we just finish the paperwork first. That was the original intention. But then there was some other stuff on his side, and then it went on for well past years. And
but he's just kept it secret.
Yeah, I wasn't even allowed to hold his hand when we were in public, or it was soul destroying. It makes you feel like you are so not good enough. It was extreme to come back from that. But then I went to another relationship after that, which was the depth of it. That was the point where I had reached my lowest.
So what happened in that relationship?
Well, I just literally tried to be somebody that I wasn't, because I was trying to make him happy. I was, trying to trying to fix all the things that had not worked before, but fundamentally what needed to work was me. I needed to be in contact with me. I fundamentally manifested so many things in my body physically because I was so unhappy. At one stage, I had 80% of my body covered in 5 different types of dermatitis. And they almost hospitalized me at some stage because they thought my skin would go into complete skin failure because I wasn't facing my emotions. I wasn't facing what was going on. So I had to heal myself. There was nothing medically they could do. I tried everything. It was literally my emotions. I had to do the work on myself.
So when you say do the work, what does that look like?
It looks like, journaling and sitting down and having realizations and doing breath work and doing meditation. That's the point in time where I really got stuck into like the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. I read Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which fundamentally changed my life because it was fundamentally identifying my addiction to an emotional state. My addiction to guilt was massive. And so I had to look at that because, why was I literally had manifested a relationship where I felt guilt all the time. Because our body, it's like a drug addiction. Our body needs it needs the hit, and so we take ourselves to another environment where we get that hit from. I got to the stage where I felt guilty for asking my partner to go and get some medication to help with my dermatitis because I'd already had 5 hours off that week to go to medical appointments. And then we ended up in an argument where he said, you should just focus on your getting better. And I was like, I am trying to do that. And we ended up in an argument where he basically told me he was going to smash my head in the mirror if I didn't stop talking. Fuck. And that was the point where I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And this is what Dr. Joe talks about all the time. He's like, your why just has to be big enough for you to draw the line. And that was the point where I drew the line, and then life changed.
So is that when you first got into breathwork then?
Yeah.
At that point, so what was your gateway into breathwork?
It was Wim Hof, like so many people.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, that was part of what became my routine every day on my journey back to myself. I meditated for 2 hours every day. So I did an hour in the morning of Dr. Joe's meditation, and I would do breath work at the same time. And then at the end of the day, I would do breath work and meditation. And a lot of people say, oh my gosh, 2 hours. Like, how did you find the time for that? And I was like, I didn't find the time. I made the time. And that's what happens. Like, if you can make time to watch Netflix, or you can make time to go to the pub, then you can make time to meditate, or you can make time to do breath work, or you can make time to journal.
So how soon into sort of doing those things did you start to feel different, or did you start to sort of see changes? Yeah,
look, I think it's always a journey, and I'm still on. I think everyone is always on the journey. If there's someone out there that says that their shit doesn't stink, then I think that there's something wrong with that. But I think that kind of work, the thing about change is it can happen in a number of different ways. It can be incremental. And so what that means is you don't see it straight away. You see little bits. There can be retrospective change. And that's kind of what happened to me. And that's where I kind of looked back and went, holy fuck, who was that person? Who am I now? I don't even know that. And I do that still now. I have moments now where I'm like, who was that person even like 5 years ago, 6 years ago when I moved to Sydney? Who was that person? That person's so different. And change can also be instant. So the thing about it is a lot of this work can produce instant change. You can have an instant chemical change in your body based on something that happens mentally and emotionally that you shift, or energetically that you shift. Or it can be like you do the things, and then you look back and you go, oh, wow. Or it can be like, oh, baby steps. I did this thing and I changed this thing. And that's amazing. Now I'm going to do the next thing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So would you say that coming out of that fourth relationship that you just described, was that the low point?
Oh, massive low point, yeah.
My final question tonight, if you could go back to that version of Renee at that low point, what would you tell her?
Oh, that's a good question. Like, my mind wants to say everything happens for a reason because, you know, that's actually true. But that feels like a fucked answer as well for that version of Renee. I think what I would say is something like it's worth it, because when you come back home after you've lived out of home for so long, it's worth it. The journey is worth it.
Beautiful. That's a great place to leave it. Thank you very much, Renee, for coming on.
Thank you.
It's been great.
Random chats.
Yeah, I can't believe that's been an hour and a half. Thank you so much. Cheers.
You're welcome, mate. Thank you.